Hey super friends, my name is Neil and today we are continuing our journey towards Warner Brothers Pictures' The Batman, which is in cinemas from March 2022. We all know the origin of the Dark Knight, but do we know the story behind one of the most iconic vehicles in popular culture, the Batmobile? In director Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins, Ra's al Ghul says to Bruce Wayne, "You are just an ordinary man in a cape." An ordinary man, but with access to billions of dollars and the toys and technology that those billions can buy him in order to help him in his war on crime. An ordinary man doing extraordinary things, but with one of the most badass sets of wheels in comic books. Though Batman debuted in the pages of Detective Comics number 27 in May 1939, the Batmobile itself, in its truest form, did not make an appearance until 2 years later. From the beginning, Batman would drive Bruce Wayne's red sedan, clearly not doing much to aid in keeping his secret identity. It was in 1941 when Bill Finger took Bob Kane's ideas and first dubbed it the Batmobile. Working with artist Jerry Robinson, they began to evolve the design into something much scarier and something much more bat-like. An accident during the 1950s would destroy the first incarnation of the famous car, leaving Batman and Robin to build an entirely new one. It was the first to feature far more prominent bat iconography, and it was at this point that comic writers began adding more and more gadgets to the car in order to suit the story. Whatever Batman needed was added at a moment's notice. The 1943 black and white Batman movie serial featured a 1939 Cadillac as the Batmobile. With the top up, it was Batman's famous car, but with the top down, it was Bruce Wayne's ride of choice. There were no bat symbols in sight, the car was simply just that, and so it would remain in live action until Adam West would take on the cowl in 1966. Created by George Barris for just $15,000, Barris took the design of a Ford Futura concept car and adapted it into what is perhaps the most iconic version of the Batmobile to date. Bet you didn't know that famous fiery exhaust was simply a paint can though, did you? That car would eventually work its way into the pages of DC Comics as the books began to replicate the success of the TV show. The same car would also appear in animated form during the 1970s wildly popular Super Friends series. Across the 70s and 80s, the car's design in comics would fluctuate wildly depending on the artist who was working on the books, with no set design for the Batmobile ever implemented during those decades. Jump ahead to 1986, and Frank Miller's The Dark Knight returns, and Batman's wheels would be traded for a humongous assault tank which would famously inspire Christopher Nolan's more armoured Tumbler. What's my favourite Batmobile, I hear you ask? Well, of course, it would be the 1989 and 1992 Batmobile featured in the movies of Tim Burton. Debuting in 89's Batman and returning, as it were, in Batman Returns, this version of the car was designed by production designer Anton Furst with the intention that it would be looking imposing and formidable on screen. Taking inspiration from Stingrays and land-speed jets, the sleek design fits perfectly into the gothic world of Burton's Batman. The initial design was hammered out using a clay maquette before graduating to a full-size model. An early issue with that design? Well, there was no door. Art director Terry Auckland Snow and his team adjusted the design to create the sliding hood which Batman uses to enter and exit the vehicle, giving it one of its most prominent design features. Built over a box chassis, the final design featured headlights borrowed from a Honda Civic, rear lights from a Ferrari, and a petrol cap which came from none other than a London bus. This time around, that famous flaming exhaust came from a Bristol Viper plane. Famously, costume designer Bob Ringwood, who was working with Tim Burton on the film, had to create a Batmobile-ready version of actor Michael Keaton's cowl with shortened ears that would allow the hood of the car to close successfully over the top of him. In early takes with the full-size cowl, the hood would close with the points of the ears caught in them, just pointing out the top of the car. A little more comedy and a little less gothic, I think. Burton's design would also influence the car that was seen in 1992's hugely successful and influential Batman the Animated Series and would go on to last for several years in animated form across movies and other media. In 1995, the Batmobile would return to live action in Joel Schumacher's Batman Forever. The design was tweaked to sit alongside the more colourful interpretation of The Dark Knight, with 5 models designed and built for the film. Each would represent a different aspect of design, but Schumacher ultimately felt that his Batmobile should appear more organic on screen. He turned to legendary artist H.R. Giger for a design which would turn out to be much more spider-like and almost impossible to create physically on set without the use of CGI. Using the inspiration of wanting to expose the inner workings of the car, designer Tim Flattery would eventually come up with a design seen on screen driven by Val Kilmer. In 1997, the Batmobile would be reinvented again when George Clooney would don the cape and cowl alongside Chris O'Donnell as the newly minted Robin. This time around, the car took on a 30s design, elongating the vehicle chassis to make it more foreboding. Clooney's Batmobile would begin life with no fins, but these would later be added to ensure that the car would still cut a bat-like figure on set. For this design, the team would also make the car a single-seater, giving Robin the ability to drive alongside his mentor in his very own sleekly designed motorcycle. Following Batman and Robin, The Dark Knight would disappear from the big screen until 2005, when he would return under the watchful gaze of director Christopher Nolan. Nolan's much more grounded take on Bruce Wayne's alter ego would call for a much more functional design for the Batmobile, a name that wouldn't even be uttered by Bruce, Alfred or anybody across Nolan's hugely successful trilogy of movies. Dubbed the Tumbler, the car was designed very much to fit the story. Nolan's ethos that all of Batman's technology would have a functionality and a reason to exist fit perfectly with the inclusion of Wayne Enterprises and Lucius Fox. As with Batman's suit and most of his gadgets, the design for the Tumbler was tied to Wayne Enterprises' government and military contracts. Designed as a bridging vehicle, the Tumbler sat in Wayne Enterprises' R&D department until Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne uttered the now iconic line, "Does it come in black?" Production designer Nathan Crowley bought model kits for a Humvee and a Lamborghini, cut them up and simply stuck them together. Gluing the model together with a cockpit from another vehicle model kit gave the production team their first silhouette for the now iconic vehicle. Presenting their model to the car's architect, Andy Smith, posed an unusual challenge. With no blueprints or drawings, it was down to Smith and his team to create a vehicle which matched the meticulous design work of Nolan and Crowley. His first challenge? Working around the fact that the Tumbler had no front axle, meaning that it was completely unable to steer. Starting at the back, the Tumbler features 44-inch monster truck tyres, whilst the front tyres came from the world of dirt track racing. Under the hood sat a Chevy V8 automatic 3-speed engine, all housed in a roll cage. With a top speed of 100 miles an hour, and after rigorous months of testing, the car was able to complete many of the practical stunts required in Nolan's script. Several versions of the Tumbler would be required to undertake filming. The stunt version featured a stripped-down interior built to withstand more of the vigorous action, whilst another version featured all of the Wayne Tech bells and whistles seen as Bale's Batman would enter and exit the vehicle in the various locations around Gotham. For 2016's Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, a new director, Zack Snyder, and a new Batman, Ben Affleck, would call for another brand new design for the iconic car. This time to be designed by production designer Patrick Tatopoulos, taking inspiration from how Christopher Nolan had torn up the rulebook, Tatopoulos looked to create something which was a hybrid of ideas past. Incorporating suspension ideas from a motorcycle, he would also bring in huge wheels and of course that signature exhaust. Tatopoulos would go on to describe his design as rougher, tougher and grungier than previous Batmobiles. In its final form, Affleck's Batmobile would clock in at an impressive 20 feet long and 12 feet wide. Unlike previous versions, the Snyderverse Batmobile would feature a Gatling gun front and centre, a weapon that would get a lot of use during its appearances in both Batman v Superman and Zack Snyder's Justice League. In 2022, a brand new Batmobile will hit the big screen with the launch of director Matt Reeves' The Batman. First revealed in April of 2020, the latest version of Batman's signature wheels returns to an incredibly sleek and understated, when it comes to Bat paraphernalia, design. With Reeves' take on Batman played by Robert Pattinson dialing the character back to his early days, the design of the car simply had to be taken back to basics. Set during the second year of Batman's fight on crime, the new Batmobile comes from designer Ash Thorpe. Using the themes of Handmade and Grounded, Thorpe created a design for the car's engine which forms the central representation of the Bat theme. Reeves would look at inspiration from an unlikely source, Stephen King's 1983 novel Christine about a supernaturally possessed car. I liked the idea that the car itself was a horror figure, making an animalistic appearance to really scare the hell out of the people Batman's pursuing, Reeves would go on to say in an interview. This new Batmobile come muscle car takes inspiration from classic American vehicles like the Dodge Challenger, the Ford Mustang and the Chevrolet Camaro. Though we're yet to see the latest version of this iconic car in action, the film's various trailers have already shown us it's going to be a monster to contend with on the streets of Gotham. Seeing Patterson's Batman chasing down Oswald Cobblepot on the streets of Gotham gives us hope we may be about to see the most formidable version of the Batmobile yet. Don't forget that Warner Bros. Pictures presents Matt Reeves' The Batman in cinemas across the globe from March 2022. If you like this video, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and ding that bell so that you can get notified whenever we release new videos. And if you really like it, why not give us a thumbs up as well. Until next time, my name's Neil. Bye! Thanks for watching, Super Friends. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit the subscribe button just down below and hit the bell so that you can get notified whenever we release brand new videos. In fact, there's 2 more waiting for you to watch right here below. So what are you waiting for? Why not click play?